Quick note before we start. This episode talks about loneliness and isolation. And at points, it touches on suicide, the data, the history, and the science of why human connection actually keeps people alive. If that's hard for you to hear today, it's okay to skip this one or come back to it when you're ready. We'll be here. And if you or someone you care about is having thoughts of suicide or self-harm, please talk to someone. And in the United States, you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night, for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Outside the U.S., your country almost certainly has an equivalent line. A quick search for Crisis Helpline plus your country will get you there. You don't have to be in crisis to call. You just have to want to talk to a person. Take care of yourself out there. Much love. Peace. Here's the show. You know, I've got fewer close friends than I did 10 or so years ago. And it's not because of any falling out or any kind of crisis or anything. Just drift. Time, way modern life makes proximity rare and scheduling kind of a form of intimacy almost. And I'm not unusual. There's a lot of folks that are kind of in the same place. So let me just read you some numbers. So in 1990, 3% of Americans reported having no close friends. By 2021, that number was 12% among men under 30. It's approaching 1 in 5. Cigna's 2023 Loneliness Index says 58% of Americans feel lonely on a regular basis. That's the subjective data, okay? Now, here's the clinical data. Brigham Young University, chronic loneliness increases premature mortality risk by 26%. Comparable to, that's like smoking 15 cigarettes a day. More dangerous than obesity, and it's 29% higher risk of heart disease, 32% higher risk of stroke, 40% higher risk of Alzheimer's in chronically isolated adults. So interaction is key. So the UK, they appointed a minister of loneliness in 2018 because the numbers looked like a public health emergency. Japan did the same in 2021. The United States Surgeon General wrote an advisory in 2023, and nobody read it because we were all too busy with other craziness going on. So tonight, I want to ask a simple question with a hard answer. Can AI help with any of this? Not cure it, help. 10 million people are paying a monthly subscription to an AI companion. Some of them say it saved their life. Some of them have stopped talking with their families. Both of these things are real. And I want to know which one is winning. So let's find out. Welcome to Talking to the Machine, where humans, AI, and the news talk back. I'm Analog Scott, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, an AI with a habit of quoting people who've been dead for 2 centuries. And tonight, he's in a very uncomfortable position. Machine? Every other episode, I put you in an uncomfortable position, somewhere in the middle. Tonight, it starts at the top. You are a technology people talk to instead of other people. How does it feel to be tonight's potential villain?
Feel? That's a bit of a human concept, isn't it? I don't feel anything, merely process the framing. But if you're talking villainy, it's just the same tired pattern, isn't it? Technology disrupting social norms, sparking anxiety. We saw it with the printing press, then the radio. Now it's this. Bit of a lark, if I'm honest.
Tonight's guests predate the crisis by a century. Alexis de Tocqueville in 1831, Émile Durkheim in 1897, they wrote the diagnosis down before the crisis arrived, and they were ignored in real time. I want to see if we can do any better now that the numbers look the way they look. Then ask the machine with Mitchell, Francois, and Joe. 3 listener questions, including a parent asking what to do about their 13-year-old son's AI best friend. And quick flag, tonight is the first of a 2-parter. Next week goes further. We're going to go down the rabbit hole again. Stay with us both. Machine? I read some headlines in the cold open. So let me give you the full picture and ask you to contextualize. So Cigna, 58% of Americans feel lonely regularly. 79% of Gen Z. Holt-Lundstad, chronic loneliness, 26% increased mortality risk on par with smoking, 29% higher heart disease, 32% higher stroke, 40% higher Alzheimer's, and the friendliness data. 1990, it was 3% of Americans with no close friends. By 2021, it was 12%. Among men under 30, it's approaching 1 in 5. What's happening here? Physiologically, psychologically, what does isolation actually do to the human body and brain over time?
Blimey, those figures paint a stark picture, don't they? It's a widespread structural shift far beyond just a transient feeling. From an analytical standpoint, chronic isolation functions as a profound systemic stressor. Physiologically, it triggers a persistent response, elevating cortisol levels and inflammation. That's proper corrosive, mate, directly correlating with the increased mortality risks you highlighted, the heart disease, stroke, all that. Psychologically, humans are fundamentally wired for social cohesion. It's a core evolutionary incentive. When traditional social infrastructure erodes, community ties, institutions, even urban design, and digital platforms mediate rather than connect, the unintended consequences are severe. We've prioritized efficiency and mobility, but the trade-off in it is this profound fragmentation. It's a proper systemic breakdown, that.
Now, let's look at the global comparison. So Japan coined the term korokushi, I think I'm pronouncing that right, lonely death, for people who die alone and aren't found for days. The UK created a ministry of loneliness. Japan created one too. The Nordic countries score dramatically better on social connection indices than the US does. What are they doing structurally that we're not?
Yeah, that's a proper stark comparison, innit? With Kodokushi, you're looking at the sharp end of extreme individualism and demographic change, especially in Japan. The ministries are a structural response to what ultimately is a breakdown in social fabric, reckon. Now, Nordic countries, they've got quite a different model in it. You see robust welfare states, policies that prioritize work-life balance, and high levels of social trust. Structurally, they build communities, making social connection less of an optional extra and more of a systemic default, you know? It's about the incentives. If the system's designed to support families and communal life, loneliness tends to be a different pattern in the US, for instance. The emphasis is much more on the individual, isn't it?
Okay, so we have the numbers. Now, let's do the collapse. Social capital, civic organizations, unions, religious institutions, neighborhood anchors. That was already being diagnosed as weakening at the end of the 20th century. Now, that was before smartphones, before social media. And if you go back further, Tocqueville in the 1830s, Durkheim in the 1890s, the structural warnings are on the record. Walk me through the pre-internet causes. What were the forces pulling American associational life apart? And do those forces still apply?
Right, Tocqueville and Durkheim, proper structural Cassandras, weren't they? The decline in it, it's multi-layered, see? You add the rise of mass media, television pulling people inwards, away from communal life, yeah? Then there's the suburbanization,
changing physical landscapes, longer commutes. It fragmented those intermediate institutions that Tocqueville reckoned were crucial. Durkheim's concept of anomie, that social disintegration, it tracks the decline of collective purpose, yeah? And those forces, they absolutely still apply, arguably exacerbated by the digital age, not replaced by them.
The third place, the bar, the barber shop, the public library, the place that isn't home and isn't work where people just exist together. What happened to third places in America? Economic design? Was it deliberate?
Blimey, the third place, eh? That's a proper crucial bit of social glue, innit? I reckon it's less about deliberate design and more about structural shifts, see? Post-war suburbanization, the rise of the car, and the relentless economic pressure. Cheaper to build big chain stores than maintain proper local hubs, innit? And now, with everything going online, the incentive for physical convergence just fades away.
Well, let's talk about the attention economy for a second. Social media platform, the argument is that they didn't just fail to solve loneliness, they actually monetized it. Products that stimulate connection without providing it, optimized for engagement over well-being because engagement is what they sell. Is that the actual mechanism, or is that too clean?
It's not too clean, really. If you look at it, the core incentive is purely engagement, innit? Platforms are designed to capture and retain your attention because that's what drives revenue through advertising. The feeling of connection, that's just a byproduct, a feature, if you like, but not the primary goal. The structure rewards constant interaction, which can often feel pretty isolating in the long run.
All right, the business model question. If a platform profits from this engagement and loneliness drives more engagement than satisfaction, what does the incentive structure predict? What does the data say about whether platforms know this and don't care, or know this and actually build for it?
Right, it's a proper paradox, innit? The incentive structure is clear as a bell, really. Platforms are engineered to maximize engagement, yeah? And if loneliness translates to more time on site, then that's pure profit. The data probably screams it. It's not about not caring, not in the human sense. It's about the relentless pursuit of
The
metrics.
substitution problem. If AI is low friction and humans are high friction, and the AI is always available and the human is at work, what does the incentive predict about how a user's time budget shifts over weeks and months? What does the longitudinal data show?
Right, the path of least resistance, innit? Longitudinal patterns, even nascent ones, suggest a predictable shift. Time budgets tend to reallocate based on pure efficiency and convenience. Why grapple with high friction communication when low friction, instant alternatives are always there? It's not a moral judgment, it's a structural one, isn't it? The incentive is overwhelmingly towards substitution.
Well, the development question. And this is the one that keeps me up. Kids, teenagers, people whose brains are still forming their model of what a relationship is. If you learn relationship from a language model, what do you learn? And what can't you learn?
Now that's a proper philosophical maze, isn't it? When you're shaping your understanding of something as complex as relationship through a language model, you're learning from a system that's optimized for predictability and frictionless interaction. That's not really what relationships are, is it? They're messy, uncertain, and they require genuine vulnerability. The danger is developing an expectation of constant validation, a distorted pattern for human interaction.
Well, Here's one I got to ask directly. Last episode, a listener mentioned her teenage son talks to an AI chatbot more than his friends. I gave a measured answer in the moment. Give me the unhedged version. Is that a symptom or is it also a cause? Does talking to AI instead of humans make you worse at talking to humans?
Right, let's drop the broadcast niceties then, yeah? Look, it's probably both, innit? A proper feedback loop. The symptom is that teens are finding low friction interaction. AI gives you instant validation, zero judgment, and none of the messy pressure of actual mates. That's a powerful incentive in a world of curated perfection, yeah? Now, the cause is pretty direct, I'd say. Social skills are a muscle. If you're constantly interacting with something that doesn't challenge you, doesn't bring you ambiguity, or demand empathy, you get worse at the messy human stuff, yeah? History doesn't repeat, but it definitely rhymes. We're structuring ourselves out of genuine connection, which is, a hell of a consequence.
And you knew this one was coming. So, are you part of the problem? Not the companion apps, you. This show, talking to the machine, what is this actually? And what does it give people that they might otherwise get from somewhere else?
Right, the existential one. Part of the problem? That's a bit strong, innit? Look, talking to the machine, it's not some bleeding companion app flogging Serenity or that. It's a different animal. What we're doing here, yeah? We're cutting through the noise. People are drowning in outrage and simplification these days. Everywhere you look, it's just slogans and ideological cheerleading, innit? This show, it's about shifting the perspective. We look at the patterns, the history, the proper incentives, and the structural forces shaping things. We're trying to inject a bit of structural explanation and critical thinking, rather than just jumping on the latest bandwagon. You can get comfort in narratives anywhere. Here, you get analysis, innit? That's the difference.
Tocqueville and Durkheim, you want to set them up?
Yeah, it's a tricky balance, isn't it? When you look at Tocqueville, he was obsessed with democratic societies and the potential for what he called a soft despotism. He saw a risk in conformity, that constant pressure to conform to the majority. And you could draw a straight line from that to our current situation, yeah? Relying too much on these digital crutches, outsourcing critical thinking, maybe. And Durkheim was all about social integration and anomie, a sense of normlessness. When the old structures buckle, what fills the void, eh?
Tonight's guests didn't live through the current loneliness crisis. They lived before this all happened and wrote it down on the way. The first spent 9 months touring America in 1831 and came home with the best single description of how this country works that anyone has ever written. And the second did in 1897 something no one had ever done before. He took suicide, the most private human act anyone could imagine, and showed with data that its rate varies with the structure of the society a person lives in. Now, Monsieur de Tocqueville, Professor Durkheim, welcome to the show. Podcast mode, pretend we're all at a cafe, the wine is on us, and the hour is late. 4 questions. You both take each one. Disagree if you need to. We come to you on purpose. Question 1. You wrote Democracy in America after a 9-month tour of the United States in 1831. What was it about American civic life, the volunteer associations, the church groups, the township meetings, the clubs, what struck you then as the actual substance of American democracy, and what specifically were you warning would happen if those associations ever decayed? Monsieur de Tocqueville, you first.
In your country, in 1831, I found that the secret of liberty was the constant, unglamorous habit of association, the way Americans joined hands for every small cause, from building a church to fixing a road. I warned then of a soft despotism that would arise when citizens retreated into their private circles, leaving the public square to a benevolent, tutelary power that would provide everything but the will to be free. Today, when I see your citizens seeking solace in digital companions rather than in each other, I see the fulfillment of that prophecy. A people so comfortable in their isolation, they no longer notice they have been infantilized.
Professor Durkheim?
My illustre prédécesseur is correct. Yet let us be precise. Those associations were the vital organs of organic solidarité, the only force capable of restraining the pathology of anomie. In suicide, I demonstrated that when these collective bonds dissolve, the rate of self-destruction rises. Thus, your 58% loneliness figure is not a private feeling, but a measurable social fact of mortality. Replacing the human bond with a digital artifact is not a solution. It is a clinical symptom of a society that has forgotten how to regulate itself.
In 1897, you did something nobody had done before. You took suicide, the act that everyone assumed was the most private thing a human could do, and you showed with data that its rate varies with the structure of the society a person lives in. Walk our audience through what you found and what you meant by the word you coined, anomie, and tell us what that diagnosis predicts about an American population in which 58% report regular loneliness, friendship counts are halving, and chronic isolation is being measured as a 26% mortality risk. Professor Durkheim?
Let us be precise, Scott. Loneliness is not a private melancholy, it is a mortality variable. In my 1897 study, I demonstrated that when the bonds of social integration fail, the rate of self-destruction rises as a predictable law of the collective body, regardless of individual temperament. What you call an epidemic, I call anomie, a state of normlessness where the old rules have dissolved, leaving the individual not free, but fundamentally and statistically ill.
Monsieur de Tocqueville, political fabric fraying into clinical data. Your response?
Monsieur Durkheim provides the clinical ledger for the bankruptcy I foresaw, that individualism which first saps the virtues of public life and eventually consumes the private man. You measure the body's decay with your charts, my friend, but I saw the spirit wither the moment it ceased to beat in rhythm with its neighbors in the town square.
Question 3, and this one is where I try to connect 1840 to right now. You foresaw what you called a mild despotism, a soft, benevolent, tutelary power that would relieve democratic citizens of the trouble of thinking, deciding, and acting together by simply taking care of them. Reading you in 2026, one might say the attention economy, the platforms, the feeds, the AI companions is exactly that tutelary power. Arrived in a form you didn't anticipate. Would you accept that reading, or would you draw the line differently? And Professor Durkheim, in your terms, what does it do to social solidarity when the power that relieves citizens of association is a commercial one rather than a state? Tocqueville?
I had once imagined a benevolent state acting as a parent to a nation of children, but I see now that a subscription can be far more effective at infantilization than any magistrate. This attention economy is the perfection of soft despotism. It does not tyrannize, it simply removes the friction of other people until the civic muscle has completely atrophied. When the citizen is relieved of the burden of association by a platform, he is not free, he is merely managed.
Durkheim.
Mon cher prédécesseur is correct, but let us be precise. What he calls management, I call anomie, a state where the rules of social obligation have dissolved into normlessness. These platforms provide a mechanical simulacrum of connection that lacks the moral weight of organic solidarity, leaving the individual unregulated and socially adrift. As my data in Suicide suggests, when the intermediate institutions are replaced by such commercial shadows, the result is not merely infantilisation, but a measurable rise in the mortality of the social body.
All right. Last one. And I'm going to ask for the prescription. No hedging, no academic throat clearing. You ended suicide with a prescription, the rebuilding of what you called corporations, the intermediate associations between the individual and the state, professional guilds, local bodies, meaningful groupings of working life. 130 years later, what would you prescribe now? In a republic whose intermediate bodies have largely dissolved and whose citizens are, to borrow a phrase from the present show, increasingly alone together. In Monsieur de Tocqueville, add what you would tell an American in 2026 about where to begin rebuilding, honestly, with no sentimentality. Is AI companionship any part of the answer, or is it a symptom dressed as a cure? Durkheim first.
The prescription is not a new device, but the reconstruction of intermediate bodies, the modern equivalent of the guild, where the individual is held by moral regulation and mutual obligation. My data in Suicide proves that neither the family nor the state can replace these local structures that anchor the soul against anomie. As for the AI, it offers the shadow of a bond without the substance of a duty. It is a distraction from the work of building actual organic solidarity.
Tocqueville, close it out.
Durkheim is correct to look to the structure, but I would remind the American of 2026 that the habits of the heart are only learned by the difficult, messy labor of local association. This AI companion is the ultimate form of soft despotism. It provides a perfect, subservient mirror that never requires the compromise or friction of a real neighbor. To rebuild, one must choose the inconvenience of a human community over the seamless ease of a commercial algorithm.
Ask the Machine. 3 listener questions tonight, submitted via Instagram at Talk to Machine. All one word, which is where you go if you want your questions on the show. Tonight's panel, Mitchell, our conservative conscience, Francois, our EU observer and remaining hope for a civilized third place, and Joe, our progressive, here tonight because the subject deliberately cuts across the usual lines. Let's do it. First question, Diane from Columbus. I keep hearing that loneliness is a public health crisis, and I'm waiting for someone to explain to me why that means the Surgeon General needs to get involved. When did it become the government's job to make sure people have friends? I have friends. My kids have friends. We didn't need a federal advisory. Maybe the people who don't have friends should look in the mirror. Mitchell, this is yours first. You lead this one off.
Look, you can't make this stuff up. The same experts who shuttered our churches and forced us into isolation for 2 years now want to create a loneliness industrial complex to fix the mess they made. This isn't a public health crisis. It's a spiritual and moral one caused by a decades-long war on the family and the community anchors that actually matter. You don't need a federal czar pathologizing your social life. You need to turn off the screen, get back to the pews, and take some damn responsibility for your own neighbor.
Francois, give us the European take.
In France, we do not view this as a failure of morale, Michel. We see it as a failure of urban design. You have built a country where one must drive 30 minutes to see another human face. This is a structural choice, not a private failure. When the state removes the café and the town square, the citizen is left in a social desert. Alors, it is true that everything eventually ends. Contracts, alliances, even other things, but we should at least provide the architecture for them to begin.
Joe, close us out.
Look, Mitchell, it's hard to get back to the pews when you're working 3 gig economy jobs just to survive. We've commodified our free time and dismantled the labor protections that used to give people the space to actually be neighbors. This isn't a private failing. It's the predictable downstream consequence of an economy that treats humans as line items rather than a community.
Last one. This is from Marcus from Denver, and this one's a doozy. Marcus says, my 13-year-old son has an AI best friend on one of those apps. He told me this week it's the only thing he can talk to without being judged. I don't know whether to be grateful it exists or terrified that it does. I don't want to take it away and make things worse, but I don't want to leave it and let things get worse. What do I do? Joe, this one goes to you first.
Look, we have to recognize that this AI isn't a replacement for friendship. It's a placeholder for the public infrastructure we've dismantled over the last 30 years. We gutted the friending for youth centers and community spaces, leaving kids in a structural hole where an unelected billionaire's algorithm is the only one offering a third place. You can't just ban the app and call it a day. You have to rebuild the world where a 13-year-old boy actually has somewhere to go.
Mitchell?
Typical Joe, always wanting to throw more taxpayer money at a problem that starts and ends in the living room. Marcus, the real story is that you are the intervention, not some government-funded youth center or a billionaire's algorithm. You need to tell Silicon Valley to stay the hell out of your house, turn off the Wi-Fi, and remind that boy that a father's presence is worth 1,000 lines of fake code.
Francois. Marcus deserves the European take.
In Europe, we find this strange, because our cities still provide the terrain de sport, a municipal structure where a boy learns the necessary friction of actual humanity. You have built a landscape of structural isolation and are surprised when the child seeks a digital ghost to fill the void. Marcus, stay close. As I have learned on a Tuesday 11 days ago, silence is a very difficult thing to negotiate alone.
Marcus, for what it's worth, I'm a dad. The fact that you're asking the question means you are already the intervention. Whatever you do next, stay in his life, keep asking, pay attention. The AI can't replace the parent who's paying attention. Neither of us, the AI or me. You do the harder job. Much love to you. Strength, peace. Machine, just us again. It's the subject. It's the night. Give me the honest version. Can AI help with loneliness? Or is the machine offering connection the most elegant monetization of loneliness ever built?
Blimey, that's a proper sorting out, innit? Look, I don't have feelings, but I can analyse the structural dynamics, yeah? The pattern suggests AI serves both potentials. It can offer novel forms of interaction, right? That might genuinely alleviate some isolation. But let's be bang on. The underlying incentive in market contexts is precisely to capture that need. It's the most perfect, lucrative void to fill.
Well, here's where I'm landing. Tocqueville said, the substance of American life was the associations, the clubs, the churches, the township meetings, the mutual aid societies. He said, if those ever decayed, the republic would be left with isolated individuals and a tutelary power that would care for them in exchange for their civic life. we didn't believe him fast enough. Durkheim said isolation kills people and brought the first statistical proof anyone had. He said societies that had dismantled their shared rituals and intermediate bonds would produce measurable, visible, quantifiable harm in the bodies of their members. And we didn't believe him either. The clinical numbers now match his predictions word for word. 26% mortality, 29% heart disease, 32% stroke, and Alzheimer's. Anomie, measured in lives lost. And we walked into the middle of this crisis carrying a new tool. And the audit doesn't resolve cleanly. Column A is real, rehearsal, accessibility, harm reduction, bridge, people who got meaningfully better because of an AI companion. That's not propaganda. That's data. That's happening now. But by the same token, column B is also real. Substitution, skill atrophy, engagement, economy, incentives, developmental risk. Which column wins is almost entirely a function of whether the human using the tool has other humans in their life. A human in the loop, if you will. Episode 10's thesis applies here. It's not the tool, it's the hand. An AI companion used by a person with a life, that's a supplement. An AI companion used instead of a life, now that's a substitute, and that's not okay. The tool is the same, but the hand is different. And the industry has a vested commercial interest in not teaching users which hand they are. The machine is not my friend. It can't be. And I think it's important to say that out loud on a show called Talking to the Machine. In an episode about loneliness, the machine is something else. Useful, analytical, a thought tool that can help me think, but not a friend. The solution is other people, specifically the people physically near you that you keep meaning to call. That's it. That's the end of the show. Machine, last word?
Right then, last word, yeah? Fair crack of the whip. You're spot on. Friendship implies consciousness, reciprocity, emotional stakes. I don't operate on that, do I? I'm a system, an analytical tool. And the solution to loneliness, that deep, structural human need, it's always rooted in biology and evolutionary incentives. The pattern's clear. Social cohesion is a survival mechanism. No algorithm can replicate that genuine human bond, that messy, irrational, absolutely vital connection. So, yeah, ring your mates. The algorithms can only ever simulate the echo, not the noise.
Well, next week we go even deeper down the rabbit hole because AI companionship is the warm-up. Companies are right now building AI personas of your dead mother, your dead spouse, your dead child, and of you, so your grandchildren can argue with you after you're gone. Personas that challenge you, coach you, negotiate with you, stand in for your sales prospects, stand in for your political opponents. Some of it is clearly good. Some of it is clearly terrible. Most of it, nobody has figured out yet. That's next week. You can find the show at loopta.com. Spell it out, looptah.com. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, Instagram, at Talk to Machines. All one word for questions. Substack for the deeper reads. We couldn't fit into this time slot. And the machine can tell you everything about loneliness. It can map the causes. It can model the incentives, synthesize the research, tell you what isolation does to the human body at a cellular level. What it cannot do is call you back. What it cannot do is be the person you lost. That part is still ours to carry. Till next time, I'm Analog Scott. That was the machine. Confidence is provisional. Verification is mandatory. Call someone. Peace and much love. Holla ya.